Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We've got Emily here from Sage who's going to take us through Sage Intacct. I'll hand over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Lauren. Hello, everyone. Thanks for spending some of your Tuesday with us today. The purpose of today is for me to run you through Sage Intacct, a little bit of an overview, and then we'll really get into what Sage is doing on that AI front and how we can kind of harness those that AI capability really to drive efficiency through your organizations. So before I jump into the system, and just by way of a bit of an introduction, so for those that don't know me, my name is Emily Singh. I'm one of the pre-sales consultants here with the Sage Intacct team. I'm also a CPA by trade, so background in accounting, and now working in this ERP space. So with that said, excited to run you through Intacct today. If you've got questions, I guess a little bit of housekeeping, there's the chat box in the system. We will have time at the end to go through questions, so feel free to kind of plug them in as we go, and I will address them. Okay, so I'm just going to switch my screen over now, and you're going to see my Sage Intacct instance. Just give me a second. Okay, so you should now be looking at my Sage Intacct dashboard. So a couple of things straight off the
Not yet,
bat.
Emma, can't see it.
Oh, not yet. Okay, let me just share again.
There we go.
Thanks, Lauren. Testing that you can see that now. Yep. Okay, great. So now you're looking at my Sage Intacct instance, and a couple of things straight off the bat. So Sage Intacct is a cloud-based solution, so accessible anywhere as long as you've got access to the internet and your browser of choice. Sage Intacct also has a very robust open API. So the idea being that we've got integration capabilities with potentially alternative operating systems that you might be wedded to within your own organizations. So we've really got a great strength there in being able to integrate with other systems you might be using. So for the purpose of today, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of Intacct for those who may not be familiar, but then we really will be spending our time looking at those AI-driven automation processes, okay, and how we can get the best benefit out of those. So just a headline, bit of an introduction. I've brought us to one of Sage's dashboards here. The idea being these dashboards are really designed for different users across the organization, different stakeholders. We give you a few out of the box, but the idea being you really come and customize these and create of them what you need for your purposes in the organization. So you can see here, I've kind of brought us to a CFO dashboard in the first instance, and I'm displaying some different type of content across here to tell that story to our CFO. I've got some graphic style content, so you can see I've got line graphs, I've got some bar charts and pie graphs all sitting in there. I'm also telling a bit of a story here with my KPI cards. So I've got some headline figures here, and I'm comparing these and showing a trend, be it period on period, so in my case, month on month, or I could also be comparing to like a budget at this point as well. If I come a little bit further down, you'll see I'm also displaying report style content on these pages as well. So my reports, I've kind of built them in the background. Sage Intacct's report building capability really is designed to be a bit of a help yourself or self-service style tool. So your team or the finance team can really go about creating their own reports for either themselves or different stakeholders across the group. Now, the good thing about these reports and choosing to display them on the dashboard like I've done here is that we can really drill down and access the kind of the activity that sits below it and what drives these particular numbers. So I guess a bit of a kind of real world example of this, coming in here, potentially as my CFO, perhaps as a controller or the like, coming and looking at this, P&L actual V budget report that I'm displaying here. So I'd kind of come through, I'm just looking for big variances jumping out at me. So what we can actually do if we come across one, we can actually drill down and understand what's driving this jump. So for example, if I jump into this utilities and facilities figure here, clicking through there, I'm going to come up to my GL. So I've got my ledger sitting underneath of everything that comprises this utilities and facilities transaction line. And I can actually click through and get to that underlying activity that sits below. So I'm just coming through here and we're going to end up all the way down at the originating transaction, which in my case was this AP purchase invoice here. once we've got that open, a little bit of a look and feel of the system, you can see I've got more links to get through to my supplier detail there. You can see I've got an attachment here, so we have the ability to store attachments against the transaction activity through the system. So they're accessible directly from the record. I can see kind of my history, which will include any approvals that this transaction's gone through, obviously my posting, and coming back here and just scrolling down, having a look at my transaction lines. You can see where I've kind of coded that activity. Now, this is a good point for me to kind of start, I guess, discussing the dimensional architecture of Sage Intacct. So Sage Intacct really, our philosophy really is to provide quite a streamlined chart of accounts. So you have this quite minimalist looking chart of accounts, and you can see that I've got this repairs and maintenance account there. And then to attach that extra element of transactional detail against that, we're populating our dimensional attributes. So we give you something like, 7 dimensions out of the box that you can put to use. And really they can be, customized to suit the needs of your organization. But really what I've done, I've gone along and I've applied those dimensional attributes in these drop-down fields here. So I've dictated this expense is actually in relation to entity number 100. Now, something else important for me to mention is that Sage Intacct is a multi-entity environment as well. So you'll have multiple entities within a single instance of Intacct, which is, I guess, fantastic for consolidated reporting purposes and, group visibility. But also really is really great if you're doing a lot of, I guess, or even a little bit of inter-entity transacting too, because we can really automate those journal processes for you too. So I've applied it to entity 100. I've applied it to my New South Wales site in relation to my consulting services department. And I've captured my supplier there as a dimension too. So using that kind of dimensional breakdown, we're actually able to really slice and dice the information within the organization. So I'm going to come back to another dashboard now and kind of show you how this looks
Sorry, and we're still
and what you
seeing the
can do with it.
dashboard.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Let me just stop sharing. And that means you didn't see my drill down. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, let me just go and I'll do that in very abridged view. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, I'm just sharing that now. Testing, you can see that and you can hear my audio okay.
Yep, I can see,
Okay,
the role-based screen.
great. Let me do a drill down and make sure you can also see this. We should be seeing that before your eyes. No, you're not. I'm so sorry. One moment. I'm very sorry, everyone. Goodness me.
It's all good. Gotta love working
Okay.
with technology.
I'm very sorry. It's giving me all sorts of alerts as I try and share. So let's hope this works. There we go. I think we have
Oh,
success.
there we go. Yep,
Okay.
perfect.
Just to
Thanks, Em.
highlight the drill down really briefly, because I've already talked you through the whole thing, I'm just dropping down here, showing how we can drill down through that report into the transactional level data that sits below. And I just want to, while I'm in this record, show you those dimensional elements that I was talking about. So I'm just clicking into this record, coming down here to the transaction line. This is the chart of account I referenced, and these are dimensional elements that I've populated along this line. Okay, so we're capturing all of that data against the transaction record as we're kind of data entering it in. And what that lets us do then is really gauge some insight through the system and being able to slice and dice those elements. So I've built this particular dashboard, more of an operational insights dashboard with that in mind. So just to really highlight those dimensional breakdowns. For example, I've got a revenue up here and I'm breaking that down by that site element that I had or that location. Okay. Similarly, I've got it displayed in a pie graph there. Over here, I've got that same kind of operating activity headline figure broken down across my entities in the group. Scrolling down, I've got my expenses broken down by department within the organization. And if I look at the right, this report's really cool actually. So this is showing my revenue, but it's showing the different ways the revenue is actually generated through different, I guess, dimensional elements of the organization. So if I look down this revenue quarter to date column here, you can see this is my split on the basis of my entities. This is my split based on my sites. Okay, this is my split based on my industries, because through my customer record, I'm actually able to define the industry to which they relate, and thus I can kind of track through the revenue on an industry basis. So, using that kind of dimensional attribute, we're really able to drill in and get really powerful reports out of system. So I guess just explaining that that's kind of the headline architecture of Sage Intacct, and having the multi-entity piece in there as well, just to give you that introductory understanding to what we can do. Now I want to move into kind of the crux of what we're here, and it's really to look at Sage Intacct's AI powered and what we're doing in that space. So I'm going to come up here to my app switcher and just highlight this is how we'd kind of navigate around the system. Obviously, there's lots of bits and pieces in there that I'd like to show you, but for the purpose of our AI discussion, we're going to have a look at our accounts payable and our purchasing functionality. So we're going to look at those. Then we're going to come down and have a look at some of the AI assisted activity we've introduced to our general ledger controls as well. So let's kick it off with our AP automation. So I'm going to come in here and show you what we can do. So Sage Intacct's introduced the ability to have AI do some of the heavy lifting with regards to transaction data entry within the AP space. Okay, so I'm looking at an account payable screen now. These are kind of accounts payable invoices that have been input to system to date. We'll go through what we can do. So we can get our invoices into system in one of two ways. They can be emailed in, as I've done actually in most cases here. So emailed through to Intacct, you'll have kind of a defined address distinct for each entity in your group. And that will be sent through, or we can upload them directly into system. So if I'm just hitting upload there, we can upload up to 30 attachments at any one time in any of these specified formats here. Okay, I guess a point to note is one attachment should be one invoice. Okay, so best not to kind of have them all scanned as in bulk, but upload each invoice separately. Okay, once we're in here, what they'll do is the system will read that invoice as it comes in. So obviously we've got OCR capability on that. So we're pulling off elements from the invoice as OCR typically would. But over and above that, we've got machine learning layered on there as well. So the system's going to actually start to learn how you would typically process these types of invoices. When it first comes into system, whether it be via email or this upload point and that analysis is happening, it will come in as draft format. Okay, so you can see my state column here. Most of mine are sitting in draft. There's a couple I've already reviewed and actioned, and they've gone through and I've posted those. So, as a user, a typical day, I'd come in, I'd kind of send my invoices through, I'd forward them on or I'd upload them. And then I'd come in and I'd have a look at what the system has kind of started doing, some of that heavy lifting for me in that regard. So if we come into a record here, we'll go and see what Intacct has read for me. Okay. So it's already giving me a little bit of an alert. Okay. It's letting me know there's actually an invoice, potentially a duplication here. So as someone coming through and posting, it's kind of already letting me know where I probably should be directing my attention and potentially looking for duplications. As I come down, I can see the types of information the system's pulling off the invoice. So I've got my date's pulling off my supplier's been identified. If a supplier hadn't been identified at this point, that's okay. I can kind of, if I have user permissions, I can kind of come through and add it at this point as well, just to speed things up. Obviously, I've pulled my AP invoice number as well. Now, terms can be pulled for the invoice, but depending on what you've set up against your supplier record, you might have different terms in agreement with the supplier. It will pull those terms on that basis. Then if I come down to the transaction line itself, it's going to do what it can for us here. So in my case, it's kind of populating my account because it knows typically for this supplier, this would be the account I would use. And it's also going to start to populate what it can on a dimensional basis too. So it knows we're working within entity Australia at the moment, my Australian entity. So it's populated that on my behalf. At this point, it's actually unsure of the dimensional attributes. So we would go through and populate those now. So maybe we'll do that. Let's throw these in. We'll say it's for New South Wales and admin. Um, and the good thing is the system's going to start to learn these behaviors. So if I'm very regularly coding this type of activity to these dimensions, in time, I would expect to see the system populating that from the outset on my behalf. Okay, I'm also going to just populate the tax detail. This would typically could be driven from the supplier record, and the tax-based information can come from there. And we'll populate that one through, and then we'll submit that. Okay, so that one will be able to go through and now be posted, and then I can just keep working my way down the list. So this kind of AI process is all about really doing that heavy lifting on the data entry piece for us. So we're not really having to be that preparer anymore. We're really coming in and being able to fill the shoes of the reviewer. Before I move on, just a couple of points to note from here. I'd already mentioned the system would pick up a duplication, so it has identified duplications for me. So it's giving me an alert there where that might be the case. It'll also, sometimes you'll see these resolve style exceptions as well. And in my case, it's typically when potentially a supplier couldn't be identified or something like that. So we'd expect to see those. So again, we can direct our attention to those ones first. Now, kind of what we're looking at now is the machine-led or AI capability within AP invoicing. So we're sending kind of statements through or invoices through that really haven't stemmed from activity through my purchasing workflow. But what we can do with Intacct now is actually extend this capability into those purchasing workflows. So within purchasing now, what we can do is we can start to use this same style of functionality, so this same OCR and machine-led reading tools to actually identify when a PO in system would match the invoice that's coming through. So I'm going to come in here and look at a record. So this one I had raised a PO for previously for Australian Supply Depot. My colleagues had gone through, we'd raised a PO that'd been sent to our supplier, provided goods, and they've sent me the invoice back. So as that's come into system through that same either email input or the upload input, the system's actually identified a matching PO here. So let's go in and have a look. Indeed it has. We'll just bring out our document on the side. So it's actually telling me here, obviously the headline information, but it's actually telling me what it's converted it from. So what it's picked up on this basis. So it's, for me, it's linked us to PO 116, which is correct in my instance. If I go into edit mode, I'll have the ability here to change this had it picked up the wrong one. Okay. When we're matching, when we're PO matching, a lot of my line level data is actually coming from the PO activity itself, not necessarily from the invoice that I'm looking at here on the right. So were there kind of changes, between what was supply of goods and what was kind of raised via PO? This would be the point where I'd come through and I'd make those adjustments against this line item in the edit mode before I hit to post them through to the ledger. Okay, so that is our AI in AP and purchasing piece. The next thing I really want to move on to is the ability we have to, I guess, streamline approval processes through our general ledger. Okay, what we can do there, I guess two things. It's quite important to note. First of all, is that Sage Intacct actually can add an approval step for you when journals are posted directly into your GL. Okay, so we can enforce an approval at that point, and we can determine who the approver of those entries will be. So I'm logged in today in my capacity as Emma, the financial controller, and I am that approver for direct GL entries into system. Okay, so what I've done, I've actually enabled the functionality that we call outlier detection. So outlier detection's actually AI-led, so it is very much AI-led, and basically it's looking at kind of past behaviours across the business. What's typical by way of coding and amounts for different journals. And if there's anything that comes through that's atypical, the system will actually identify that, give me a little alert against that. So as approver, I can really come through and I can, I guess, pay most attention to the most likely erroneous transactions first. So I'll just draw your attention to this outlier column in my approval list. So as approver, I guess I would come through, I'd look at those ones that have been flagged. So in my case, it's I've got a few in there, but let's have a look at the top one. So we'll come in to view this before we approve it, and we'll have a look what's going on. So we've got a little bit of a headline reference up here. The system's telling us it's an unusual historical match. Okay, and then if we come down to the transaction reference itself, you'll see my outlier, I guess, reference is provided. So if I hover over this, I can actually see what the system has deemed is unusual in relation to this transaction. So in my case, it's an unusual combination of, I guess, account and dimensions. But it's also picking up the amount is rather unusual as well, which I would hazard that it is maybe a case of fat fingers in the data entry there that have sent through quite an erroneous number there. So as reviewer, I would come through, look, I would decline this. I'd send this one back. You see I have the ability to add some commentary there. The submitter can be notified as well, so we can send some notifications back to them for them to correct that entry and have that one resent through. So again, I guess it's just about really streamlining processes that we can to focus our attention better, I guess, on activity that's, I guess, more beneficial than the data entry. And I think for Sage Intacct, we're really moving towards, and I said it a little earlier, it's this idea that we're moving away from being the preparer in our day-to-day lives and day-to-day operations and kind of moving into those shoes of the reviewer. So if I just come back to a dashboard for a minute, thinking of our, senior colleagues across the group or even our team members, being able to kind of automate some of those processes, those time-consuming processes, will give us more time to kind of get genuine value from the numbers at the end of the day. And I guess not just the numbers, but having the trust in the figures themselves, knowing through that they've been through these kind of not only machine-led kind of detections as it's going through, but then we've got that human element overviewing over what's the word, the human element over the top of that too, and directing their attention to the most likely erroneous candidates. So I guess if we come back as well and we're thinking about best practice around these AI elements, there's a couple of thoughts I wanted to add. One of them really is in relation to the AP piece, right? So I think one of the things we need to be aware of, or one of the best practice lines is where can we save the most, or what's going to give us the most bang for our buck, I guess, in relation to introducing AI and machine-led capability. And I think Sage's own kind of research on this, or we've done quite a lot in this space globally as well. But I think it's something like 30% of time with this AP process, so up to 50% of time is spent really on that data entry process and I guess the categorization process of this. So if we can lift that activity out of the hands of the team, we can introduce the time saving there. So best practice, I guess, looking for bang for your buck. The next one really is to, incorporate that human oversight. So we saw with the purchasing and the AP workflows, they were coming into a draft status in the first instance. So we can rely on this technology, we can really introduce it to the organization, and we have that step of human oversight to kind of familiarize ourselves with it, get the team invested in the process and understanding of its workings. I guess walking before we run with our AI capability. And the next thing really is just ensuring that it's scalable and it's flexible as we grow. So we want something that's going to grow with us, the AI that's going to evolve over time as well. So really introducing a solution that'll be able to expand and grow as we do. Okay, that's really the key functionality I wanted to go through today. I'm going to pause for a moment. I'll see if there's any questions in our little chat box. Very happy to redirect us back to any particular element. So please feel free.
Thanks, Emily. Does anyone online have any questions that they want to ask of Emily? Nope, you did such an amazing job, Emily. Everyone got everything.
Apologies for the tech trouble, everyone. We got there in the end. It was,
Oh,
oh dear.
good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to send through an email and we'll get back to you. Otherwise, I'll send the recording out to you. But thanks, everyone, for joining us today. And thanks, Emily, for doing that for us.
Absolute pleasure. Great.
Have a
Take care,
great day,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.